Hi, everybody. Welcome to My Other's Keeper. I am so happy today to have my friend Mary from Blessed to Crochet on. She is one of the sweetest, happiest people I've ever met, and I just love her. Anyway, today
I
we're
love
going
you
to be
too.
talking. And I found out that she's younger than me, and I made a mistake and thought she might be the same age, but she's not.
That's
She's
okay.
a child yet. She's still a child. I'm willing to call her that. Anyway, so today we're going to be talking about MS and caregiving in particular. Um, my Aunt Marilyn has MS, and I say has because she is 82 years old and she's still trucking. And I'm just
Amazing.
so excited about that. And then, Mary, who are you going to be talking about?
My grandfather George, who I lovingly called Papu, which is grandfather in Greek, and
Mhm.
unfortunately he's not here anymore. But I have a lot of wonderful memories. So, like I said in my short video I did, thank you for all
Mhm.
letting me walk down memory lane because he's a really special person.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, my Aunt Marilyn, my she's from my dad's side of the family, and there are five, oh gracious, let me count. One, two, three, four, five, six kids. And they're all girls except for five. And Aunt Marilyn is that one. There she is. That's my Aunt Marilyn. And that was 2 years ago at my dad's memorial service. So there's her and two brothers who are still alive out of all those kids. And she is heading to be the last one going. Let me tell you, she's a firecracker, that lady. Um, so yeah, she is a sweet, sweet, sweet woman. Just, I can't say enough good things about her. She is kind, she's generous, she's all of these things. But she also has multiple sclerosis.
Yes.
Um, so, Mary, what do you remember about your grandpa?
Well, I think it's important in the story to be able to say that this is not my biological grandfather.
Hmm.
Um, my biological grandfather, which I did a little bit about, that my grandfather and his son surviving together. He
Hmm.
decided he was an alcoholic.
Hmm.
Um, my grandparents were divorced, and he decided that he was going to unalive himself with a pew pew. And so I did not have the honor or privilege of meeting my grandfather. This was my grandmother's third husband that they actually winded up in the same apartment building. And my uncle started hanging out with George, and my
Hmm.
grandmother wanted to meet this person named George. And that's how they met. This was my grandmother's third husband. And my
Wow.
grandmother's first husband, or not first husband, my grandfather's first wife said once she found out he had multiple sclerosis, said, "You're no longer a man," and walked out. So if it hadn't been for that, they would have never met. And he said to her, "Will you marry me?" And he says, "I don't want you to answer for 30 days." He said, "My life will never be like a normal husband and wife." He was
Yeah.
on Canadian crutches by then. And
Yeah.
he said, "I'll give you 30 days to tell me." And he did. She said
Hmm.
yes, and they got married on Halloween.
How long
That
were they a couple before they got married? Before he asked her, I guess.
I don't know, but they were married for 25 years. I mean, if you want to talk about a
Okay.
love story, and she took amazing care. He lived to be as long as he did because of my grandmother.
Oh, that is so awesome.
Yeah.
That is so sweet.
Yes.
Yeah. Love stories like that, you just can't beat them. I mean, honestly.
No.
And you and Josh, another beautiful love story, I have to say.
Yeah.
Like just
That's my
knowing,
husband.
yeah, yeah, Josh is this guy. No, yeah, her husband Josh.
That's my grandmother and my grandfather. And you're going to notice when I show pictures of my grandfather, he was always smiling.
Yeah.
Um, I don't remember him holding me. I just remember him being in a wheelchair and not being able
Mm,
to move very much. But this is the crew gets to see little pictures of me as a
Yes.
baby, and that was him. And then he just always had this smile. I mean, he wasn't, by then in this picture, he could not move below the neck. But he always smiled. It was just a joy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to get into a few of the key facts and figures and little known trivia and whatever.
Yep.
Okay. So the cause of MS. What is MS? Okay. Multiple sclerosis. And I printed things off because I am not that smart. I need notes. So being smart has nothing to do with what you can memorize. It has everything to do with being able to access information when you can find it. So multiple sclerosis is a potentially disabling disease of the brain and spinal cord and central nervous system. I got this definition off the Mayo Clinic website. In MS, the immune system attacks the protective sheath, or the myelin, that covers nerve fibers and causes communication problems between your brain and the rest of your body. Eventually, the disease can cause permanent damage or deterioration of the nerve fibers. Signs and symptoms of MS vary widely between patients and depend on the location and severity of the nerve fiber damage in the central nervous system. Some of the people with severe MS may lose the ability to walk independently or ambulate at all. Ambulate means to move anything at all. Yeah. Other individuals may experience long periods of remission without any new symptoms, depending on the type of MS they have. There's no cure for MS. However, there are treatments to help speed the recovery from attacks, modify the course of the disease, and manage symptoms. So while there's no cure, there's hope. You don't have to just kind of decide, okay, I have MS, I'm done now with life. It's not how it works.
No.
So
that wasn't my grandfather at all. No,
not at all.
He was going to live. He was going to smile.
Yep. So let's see. Some more key facts. Diagnosis of MS is done by exclusion because there's no definitive diagnostic test. They can't just send a camera down your nerves and say, this one's broken, this one's broken, this one.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't that be great?
It would be nice.
MRIs,
they don't have it for fibromyalgia either, so.
I know, yeah.
We're in the same boat.
MRIs can help diagnose by showing the plaques or sclerosis of the brain and spinal cord. So that's just a buildup. You know the plaque that you get on your teeth? That's exactly the same stuff. You don't get it from not brushing your teeth, but it's the same stuff. Other tests, such as a lumbar puncture, otherwise known as a spinal tap, optical coherence tomography, that's OCT, and visual evoked potentials can also help support the diagnosis. So the diagnosis is done with elimination. These others support that diagnosis. So it's like we were saying, it's not definitive, but it can be supported. Mary, we talked about this just a moment ago. Where is the MS capital of the world?
Canada, which I was very surprised to hear.
Canada.
Yeah.
Yes. And in Canada, the capital of MS is the prairies, in particular Saskatchewan, and that's where I'm from. Yeah. So it is just one of those things where you live, they think that the lack of sun in the northern and southern hemispheres affects it, but that's just a theory. And well, the irony is Saskatchewan is the sunniest province in Canada. So I won't necessarily agree with that. Like, it's a theory, but it doesn't bear out if you look at all of the information. Up to 10% of people with MS have mild or benign symptoms. So you can go through your whole life and just end up needing a cane, or not even needing a cane to walk. I have a friend I went to high
There's a
school
star
with.
that has it. There's a star that
Sorry?
has it, and I can't remember who. There's a star that has it.
Mm-hmm.
She uses the cane, and I can't remember.
Not Selena. Oh, I know her name. I can
People in the
picture her
chat.
face. Yes. What's the name of that? Serena. Oh, I can picture her face. Anyway, yes, she does have MS. Actually,
Yes.
there's two in particular. Christina Applegate also has MS, and she was on the Oscars or the Emmys, one of the two, recently, and she presented an award, and she was able to walk. Yeah, Christina Applegate and Selma, not Selma Hayek, Selma, her. Oh well, we'll figure it out later. Chat, you Google it, we'll trust you. Okay, so somebody with MS, average lifespan is around 78 or 76 years, compared to an average of 73 or 83 and a half. Oh, if I could talk today, Mary, life would be
That's
so
okay. I
much.
got you.
Okay, so average of 76 years with MS compared to a lifespan average of 73 and a half years of people without. 83 and a half years. Yes, people with MS live longer than those without. I can't talk today.
It's okay. I got you.
Out of coffee. Okay. Maybe that's the problem. So, what was the other one? I don't need to give that one. I don't need to give that one. Diagnosis. Yep, there's that, there's that, there's that. And then there's this, but we can save this till later because who needs more dry information all at once? Yes, that's just what we need. Dry toast information. Okay.
Well,
so
my grandfather was served in the war and served in the military. And so he was amongst the brothers chosen to go. And when he did go to the military, he went off and they all thought he was gold breaking. I was told that he was probably the one that had the illnesses the most. And gold breaking means you're just trying to make up an excuse. You don't really want to work. And they would send him back working harder, which meant that his MS symptoms would be worse later on in life. So he was one of the first people that got service aggravated disability. He fought for it. He opened the door for so many other vets in the world to be able to obtain that. He had all the documentation to say, proof, I really did have something. And he was taken care of for the rest of his life because he was able to prove that they were at fault for making his MS worse later in life.
Wow.
And he opened the door. He was the first one to get it.
Unfortunately, there's no treatment for MS itself. You can treat the symptoms to a degree.
Yes.
Because it's autoimmune. Your body is attacking its nerves.
Yeah.
So what was it called? The
myelin.
Yep. The myelin is the outside sheath of the nerve. And what it does is that it attacks that sheath and breaks it down so that the nerve is just not going to communicate properly.
No.
So Selma Blair, yes, that's who it was. Annette Funicello also had MS. And Montel Williams, I did not know he had MS.
And Kathy Saltzman's my mom. So she said it took him 7 years to research to prove his case.
Wow. Yep. Yeah. So my mom is also in the chat. She's Mary Lynn Lucas. And so I have an Aunt Marilyn and a mom, Mary
She's
Lynn.
awesome.
Yeah, my mom's really awesome. I quite like her.
So were you. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah. So my mom would probably have more memories of what Aunt Marilyn was like as a younger woman. They were great friends when I was little. So I just have childhood memories of my Aunt Marilyn just being somebody who would never give up. She was a I believe she was a teacher. I think I'm remembering correctly that she was a teacher. And so she was smart, that lady. And she and her husband traveled all over the place. So she didn't let the MS hold her back at all.
Yeah. The end of my grandfather. When I was
There we go.
little, he was he'd say to me, he never thought he'd be a grandfather. He didn't have any children of his own, so he loved the fact that I was told the happiest days of his life when he's married my grandmother, and when I had me as a granddaughter. Of course, my mom and my uncle were precious too, but he never thought he'd be a grandfather. So he sat there and he said, "Okay, Mary, just say grandpa." And I couldn't say grandpa, but I could say papu, which is grandfather in Greek. And he said, "Okay, I'm a papu." Well, my grandmother was Scottish. She told you just like it was. There's a saying, you don't scare me. I was raised by a Scottish mother. That's my mom. And she knows what that's like. So she just told you how it was. She didn't care. And she goes, "In my case, it would come out yo-yo, because the name for grandmother is Yaya." And she says, "I refuse to do it. I'm Nana." So she was Nana and he was Papu. But he used to call me his Skoli Kakimo, which I know sounds terrible, but it is very endearing to me because it means little wiggle worm. So I was his little Skoli Kakimo.
That is so cute.
And he would watch me out in the pool. He had an electric wheelchair. He would go down to the grocery store, which like a block away, it was a Publix. And all the Publix crew knew him. And he would go take his electric wheelchair and go down, even if it was just for a can of soup. He just wanted to interact. He wanted to talk to people. He was a people person. And sometimes I would sit on the back of his battery pack with his flag and ride down there to the grocery store. And they had my grandmother's number so that if he was down there and there was a rainstorm, they could say, "George is just fine. He's chit-chatting. He'll be back in a little bit." One day he just brought home a little plant, 79-cent plant that's still growing in Florida that a neighbor is taking care of, that's doing a beautiful job.
Wow.
And
what kind of plant? Okay, now I'm curious. What kind of plant?
She told me what it was. She sent us a picture, and I don't know what it was, but it was this little
you can't just bring
79-cent
up plant and not tell me what it is. That's just not fair. I enjoy plants.
Saved it too.
So
let's see. But he brought that home he would go down the store for the littlest things just to get out and go down there. He did drive. He had, this was this little 79-cent plant.
Okay, your mom says a false Aurelia.
Yeah, that was it. It was tiny.
Okay.
And he brought that home to my grandmother.
All right.
But it's still growing in Florida. But he drove. He had a car all set up for driving. I thought it was really smart of him to get in the car, and they went to a mall. He got in the car. He went to the mall. He said to my grandmother, now we didn't have cell phones back then, but he just called her up and he said, he got there. They got done with their shopping. They went everywhere, and he said, "Kathy, you're going to have to call me." He said to my grandmother, which is Nana, "Nan, you're going to have to call Kathy. I can't drive home." And that was it.
That was the end of his writing.
I thought it was today. I thought, he could have tried, but he knew where his limits were. Yeah. And it was, I'm done.
That takes a lot of courage.
Yes.
Because people think that quitting's easy.
Yeah.
No. Giving up driving, which means your independence and all of that. When you're a people person, when you're a person who wants to get out and see people, that is painful.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
But he'd have this family down. There was a lot of Greek. So his relatives would come, his sisters and brothers would come down, and he just had this laugh and this presence that was just like, I'm going to have fun and I'm going to enjoy my life, even though I'm stuck in this wheelchair. And people need to understand, when you're an MS patient and you no longer can move, you have to have physical therapy come in. Yeah. You have to have people doing things like, depending on how they take care of their bodily functions and everything. I'm not trying to gross anybody out, but it's the truth.
No, but that's, yeah.
They have to have people take care of one side and the other side, and nurses and aides and therapists that come in and stretch. Well, when you got him out of bed, once he could no longer move, he got out with the assistance of a lift. And there were times where you lifted him out of bed and he went into a pan, literally straight body. He was having a spasm. And I could just see. Now, I didn't, as I got older, I realized what was happening. I could see his tears just running down his face. It hurt to have those muscle spasms. And you just he had to stop, let them guide down and let his body relax before you put him in the chair.
Yeah.
But he just got in that chair and put a smile on his face. I'm going to find out how to make you smile today. How can I bless you today? And I knew he was hurting.
Yep. Yeah.
People just think you lift him out of bed and he's going to be flat. He's going to be fine. He's just dead weight. He's not.
Okay. La Chameleon says, I can't stay for this live, but I will catch the replay with interest. Her stepdaughter,
thank you.
The stepdaughter was diagnosed with RRMS at age 27 when she had an attack that nearly killed her.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Wow. And there will be a continuation of that. Yeah. Anne from Massachusetts had to have her right leg amputated below the knee 4.5 years ago. Absolutely. Driving and that independence, isn't that just rough? That's rough. You do almost everything else, but driving.
Realize I just took my hand and scratched my nose. If he had a scratch, he couldn't, and once he was unable to move, if he had an itch, he had to call for my grandmother. Can you itch my nose? Can you itch this? He couldn't do some of those basic things you and I take for granted every day.
Yeah.
If he needed a drink, he had to be fed. He lost everything, but yet he put a smile on his face. Yeah. I told this story, I think, someplace, I can't remember. I may have told it on the boat about the time that we went to Disney World and Epcot. And you know that ball with the golf ball? He wanted to ride that ride.
Oh, boy.
There's no wheelchair accessible on that ride.
Oh, no.
But he was going to go on that ride no matter what. And he got out of the chair. They got there and they stopped the ride for him to put him on this chair. My mom was there. My dad was there. My grandfather was sandwiched in the middle. He had plaid, slippery pants. The seats were slippery. And as he's going the ride, he's going down. He's sliding. My grandmother's flipping out. Here's where the what you think is dead weight is not dead weight. They stopped the ride to take him out of the chair or out of the ride and put him in the chair. Well, he went into those spasms. He went flat and his pants dropped.
Oh no.
My grandmother she's just hysterical. She's like, oh my goodness. And my grandfather is laughing. He thought it was, he said, I'm having a blast. He said, I'm having fun. I loved it. And he was in his chair and he was just laughing up a storm because it was like, what can you do? I can't do anything about it. But he was laughing and my grandmother was so mad. I was like, he looked to put a smile on his face in the most difficult situation. And it was just his, I can't think of the word, his determination and just, I don't know. It just was amazing. It was contagious.
Yes. Yeah. So the inappropriate heifer, her mom went blind at 53, very young. I know that because I'm almost 53. Well, I will be in a while. She gave up on life because she couldn't drive or do things like she used to. She took care of her, but mom passed at 60 from a blood clot. Refused all medical treatment. That just, that breaks my heart. It's, oh, sorry. And, oh, there we go. I did want to do that one. Dufster Rhymes cared for his mom through her dementia. different disease, but he can relate to a lot
Yeah.
of this.
Yeah.
Mom was devastated to lose her driver's license. Absolutely. Absolutely. That independence, that feeling that
Yeah.
that autonomy, right? That is rough when you lose that. With fibromyalgia, I imagine that there's some things that you wish you could do that you can't.
Oh yeah.
Does that sound about right?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
There's
Okay.
a lot of days I go, okay, Papa, if you can get out of that bed when you couldn't do it without help, I can get out.
Mhm.
Um, and what was interesting is that my grandfather was, of course, for many years had the help of a lift. Well, as my dad got older, and a lot of the caregiving we learned from my grandfather and how we took care of him, we were able to put over to my dad. There's bed sores. So we knew kind of how to treat that
Right.
because you have to change them over. And my grandmother would, on a hospital bed, she'd put a sheet in the middle so it was easy for her to grab the sheet, turn them over on the
Yeah.
side, and prop up the pillows.
Yeah.
She was not a nurse by any stretch of the means, but she taught
Mm.
those nurses how to take care of a bedside patient. And so we learned how
Mhm.
to do a lift. By the time my dad came along in his stages with dementia and needed the assistance of the lift, we knew a lot of the stuff. It was not, we're learning this brand new and dealing with somebody now that is in that position because we had to caregive for my grandfather. It became very second nature
That's right. Yeah.
to get him dressed and put a shirt on and do this. He had TMJ and tic Delarue. He did go in for procedures to cut nerves. They didn't do
Mhm.
it on both sides, but one side.
Okay.
Those that don't know what that is, it's like somebody's taking just a hot pricker and putting it to your face. It's
Ouch.
very painful. I was
Yeah.
probably about 13 years old, and I was in my grandmother's bed. I spent the night, and I said, "Now, Nana, you go in the bedrooms down the hall. You sleep, and I'll take care of Papu." Well, I woke up in the middle of the night, and he was screaming in pain.
Mhm.
And there's just tears were just rolling down his face. He scared me half to death. And he was not worried about himself. He just kept
Right.
saying, "I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." I said, "Papu, it's okay." And he said, he was more worried about me than he was about himself. And that was who George was.
Right.
He just had that kind of thing. But, um, everybody's different. Like I was trying to explain to everybody in the lifeboat, my fibromyalgia symptoms are different than someone else's. We kind of have all the same baseline, but there's
No, that's
different
right.
things that they struggle with.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
you know, it's tiring on, yeah, he was a very sweet man. It's tiring on the family. My mother
Mhm.
was working as a teacher and she was getting sick a lot, being around small kids. So, she came and stopped doing that. And my grandmother says, "Listen, I got to pay somebody anyway. Why don't you come in here and help me take care of George?"
Mhm.
And so she went to my grandmother's house and caregive for him and with my grandmother, 5 days a week,
Right.
or 4 days a week. And we only lived about 20 minutes away. So we were able
Mm.
to assist. And I think that's
Okay.
really, really important. When you are caregiving for somebody, you've got to lean on people to help.
Yeah.
That
You
was one
can't
thing.
pour from an empty cup, right?
My grandmother didn't like to ask for help.
Yeah.
um, she wanted to do it all, but
Mhm.
she, my mother was there to help take them to the grocery store because my grandmother didn't drive either. My grandmother
Right.
tried to learn how to drive and failed miserably and said, "I'm done." And I want people to understand something about my grandmother. My grandmother had polio, so her left arm
Oh,
was
wow.
not functioning like her right one. She
Right.
came from Scotland and she got that as a child. So she, of anybody I've ever knew how to work with one arm versus most people that I don't think
Yeah.
know full function to work with two.
That's
So
right.
she was
Yeah.
taking care of a disabled individual with 1.5 arms. She learned how to function with that.
Yeah.
And she would fuss at him just like he wasn't sitting in that wheelchair.
Well,
Oh,
being in a wheelchair is no excuse, let me tell you.
they were
Oh,
a
yeah.
hoot. They had a roofer that used to come over and just get them into little just fusses between the two of them. And he'd sit there and go,
Mhm.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Because they were so cute when even they would argue back and forth with each other. He had one of those machines that you sit in so that it can
Okay.
stand you up.
Oh, that's fun. And by
So,
fun, I mean, wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that his body wasn't sitting down and he could have like a half an hour where he was actually standing up. They strap, belts on the back, and they just slowly lift you up so you're actually in a standing position.
Mhm.
And he would have that. Um, and he had a wheelchair accessible van, so we were able to put him in and take him out. And he went out to lunch, and he went out and he was like, I'm going to enjoy my life. And he sure heck made sure he did.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yep. Nana used to call him a blinking pest. Because his laugh,
Oh,
I mean,
goodness.
when understand you can't move, and so he's laughing and his
Yes.
whole thing is happening. And,
Oh,
you
man.
know,
Yeah.
you know, but people don't think about, like, he had a catheter. So all that had to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
all that had to be changed out. And then you have to examine his body and make sure he doesn't have any wide open sores. And then in the middle of the night, if
Even the
he has
bruises
an itch,
becoming sores because the
yes,
skin gets so thin.
they
Yes.
they said, and there was nurses that came in that would say, do you know what we see in patients like George? We see them covered in bed sores,
Yeah.
covered, because they're not properly taken care of. And this is not
Right.
a dig on people that can't do it. You should never feel guilty if you don't feel like you're capable of
Mhm.
being able to care for somebody you loved. We were fortunate to be able to do it for my dad, but if we all got to the point where we couldn't, then you need to put them someplace where they can be cared for if you cannot do it yourself. And you should never feel guilty about it.
That's right. When my stepdad, my papa, um, developed dementia, my mom has been a long-term care aide in nursing homes most of my life, and I say has, like she didn't retire how many years ago, but she was a long-term care aide in nursing homes most of my life. Because of that, she knew exactly what to look for,
Yeah.
exactly what to do with him when he was going down. Going down in his symptoms. And when he finally needed to stay in a home, that was one of the hardest things for
Yeah.
her. She felt like she had failed, but at the same time, I'm looking at her going, Mom, you kept him out of there for
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Um, the nursing staff told her that there are people who are in this unit who aren't nearly as bad off as what your husband is because you took
Goodness.
care of him so
Yeah.
well. Right? So when
Yeah.
people are carers, are caring people who do the caring, that is
Yeah.
that's a whole
It's a
nother
hard job.
level of
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
There's
Yes.
joys and there's struggles. And I remember being 12 years old and being mad and angry at my
Mhm.
grandfather because he couldn't do all the stuff that regular grandfathers
Mm.
can do. He couldn't go to ball games, and he couldn't do this with me or that with me. And I remember being angry. Part of it was
Mhm.
because I had no other living grandfathers that I had met. Now I did get to reconnect with my dad's father about a
Right.
couple years
Okay.
after that, but I didn't have that, and I just was angry, and that's okay to be angry.
Yes.
I was, I think, at that point realizing the gravity of what my mother had to do, and what my nana had to do,
Mhm.
and so forth, to caregive for him. And I was there was a time to be angry with it, and
Mhm.
my parents gave me that time to be angry and not beat me up for it. It's okay for
Right.
you to be angry. It
Absolutely.
was like realizing it, even though I loved him dearly. And I I don't think I realized till after he was gone. He passed away in December of 31st of 1997.
Okay.
And I don't think I realized after he passed how really special he was in my life. And I regret, there are some regrets that I didn't spend more time with him. And realize I realize it now, but I wish I'd realized it back then.
Yeah.
But
yeah, Duffsta's talking about his mom. Duffsta, are you male or female? I can't really tell from the picture because frankly I am blind. Anyways, I'm assuming you are male. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But mom came out of the hospital with bed sores and a bout of delirium from UTI. How many people here have ever had a urinary tract infection? UTI, bladder infection, those are common.
Yeah.
Elderly people, people with compromised immune systems, that can take them out entirely. It's not something that you can, it's not something to play with kind of thing, especially when they get older. So, yeah. Oh, gracious. So I'm going to come after you with, oh, by the way, for people who don't know, the ones in the comments are loves and hugs.
Yep.
Because that's how we support people, right? We give them loves and hugs and all of that other good stuff. So there's the expanded disability status scale when it comes to multiple sclerosis. 0 means that you are normal, neurological.
What's normal?
And everything's normal neurological function. Okay. So number 1 is no disability, but minimal symptoms. Well, let's go up to 4. And that's where there's significant disability, but no walking impairments. So there's a whole range between 1 and 4 of symptoms and such, with being able to do anything. And from what I've heard, please correct me if I'm wrong, with MS, is this the one where you can go to bed seeing fine, get blind for however long, and then wake up again seeing fine again? Is that the one
I think so. I'm not sure. He never had that. He could see, but if it's anything like the driving where it was like, yeah, I could do it there, but I couldn't do it back. He never got it back to drive again. But his physical therapist that used to come to the house, her name was Janet. She winded up having MS. I know it was hard for him because he loved her. She was a little tiny, tiny woman moving him around and everything.
My goodness.
I know my grandmother had a nurse in. It wasn't Janet, but they had a nurse came in, and they would help several days a week to get his clothes on and his pants on and getting him up and everything. They were having trouble getting the shirt over his head one day. And they just said, my grandma said, you know what, George, we're just going to have to shrink your head. Well, the next day, the nurse came in, and he was always just very serious as a gentleman. And he had gotten a TENS unit that they were putting on his face for his tic Delarue to TMJ to help make it better. And so the nurse came in, kind of gave this funny look at my grandfather, and my grandmother, without a beat, just looked and said, George, she said to him, she said, I told you I was going to shrink his head. That was my grandmother. They just made this. He was so
they just had a great sense of humor together, he was
just lighthearted, and she was just this dry sense of humor, and it was an amazing thing to see.
From number 4 to number 5, we've got 4 is no disability walking, and number 5 is a jump, unable to perform daily activities. Wow, that's quite a little jump there. Then you get aid. You need aid to walk. You need walking aids. My aunt is only at step 7. Nope, sorry, she's at step 8. She needs assistance with her wheelchair. She's in a wheelchair. She cannot walk on her own, and she needs assistance. But a number of years ago, we were at, like I said, 3 of her brothers have died. And yeah, okay. So 3 of her, I'm doing math. Apparently, I don't do math well. I teach
There's no
English, not
math
math.
on this channel.
That's right. Okay. I love you too, Mama. So a few years ago, one of my uncles died, and she was at the funeral, and one of her sons was taking care of her, and she could barely swallow. Her care home didn't want her away from the house or the home more than, say, 18 to 20 hours. They wanted her home back like in a day. So because they knew she needed just that much support then. 2 years ago, when it was my dad's memorial, not only did she stay a few days, she was able to feed herself. So this is, she gained a lot of capability back. Like, not all, but that's where it is that you lose some, you gain some. All of that goes in there, right? And hers is, yeah, she just is one of those people who never ever ever fight or never quits fighting. She never fights. Yes, she never fights. That one. She never quits fighting. So she's 82 years old.
Wow.
She is smart as a whip. The woman's mental faculties certainly have not gone down at all. And
That's amazing.
yeah, it's just been incredible to watch.
Well, I think too, if my grandfather had not done what he did in the military, he probably very much would have lived longer. But his
Right.
and maybe had not been in a wheelchair as quickly as he was, but because of what happened then affected him later. And when he moved to Indiana, that's a whole nother story in itself. And my mother called me and she said, I think you need to go home. And I really wish I'd gone home for Christmas. And I chose not to. There was a lot of stuff going on, and it's like I said, a whole nother story. And I got there about 3 days before the 31st. And they really hadn't told him what happened with me at the time. And I walked in, and he just wanted to see me. And it was like, okay, now I can go because I know she's okay. And it was 10 minutes before New Year's Day. And he passed away, and the fireworks were going all around him. It was like, okay, Papu, you're going to go out with a bang.
Yes, absolutely.
And I didn't realize I was 2 weeks pregnant with my daughter at the time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he'd have been a proud grandfather. He'd have been a huge, proud great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
But I really wish I had come home. If you have loved ones, and don't ever do that. If you can.
Say, please come home.
If you can. If somebody's telling you, come back, don't wait.
Yeah.
I should have come back, and I should have celebrated that Christmas with them. And I should have been there. And I was, thankfully. And I'll just never forget my grandmother say, George, don't leave. I don't know what I'll do without you.
Yeah.
Because then after that, for her, she had spent so many years caregiving for this man and loving him dearly that after I was gone, she had no idea what to do with herself.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was like, okay, what do I do with myself now? She used to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. She'd go to bed about 10. She was busy all day long, making sure he was fed and had coffee, and he had his naps in the afternoon, and he had this and that, doctor's appointments, and all this kind of stuff. And it was like she didn't know what to do with herself. So my daughter became a new light. She lived till she was in her 90s.
She lived till which?
To 95 years old.
Ooh, yeah. Nice.
That Scottish something or other went around, going around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I know, Mom. I just really
Yeah.
wish I.
Kathy is Mary's mom. The
Yeah,
important thing is that you came and you were in time.
yeah. But he waited.
Yeah.
I could tell he waited till he could see me before he was like, okay, I could leave. And I'll never forget. My mom and my grandmother were talking, and he sat there and he said, my mother says, well, George, we should be quiet so you should be able to rest. And he said, that's okay. Thank you for being considerate. And it was like,
Mhm.
you know, why are you thinking about other people? You should be worrying about yourself. And he could never do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was just always this person. And so, you know, the encouragement that I could say about my grandfather and his story
Hmm.
is, sometimes when he could have sat there and been really mad and ugly to the world and mean, but he wasn't. He chose. I don't think it would have been in his nature anyway to
Yeah.
say, how can I light the world? I'm
Yeah.
in this wheelchair. I have this. I have MS, but MS doesn't have me.
That's right. Yes,
And
absolutely.
he didn't just sit in it. And I don't think my grandmother would have allowed it. And I'm sure I didn't see a lot of the stuff that happened when I wasn't there. I'm
Right.
sure he cried with my grandmother
Yes.
and confided into her in ways that he didn't confide in either myself or my mother.
Hmm.
Um, but there and as I got older, I was more involved in his caregiving. It
Mm.
wasn't dumped on me as a child to say, okay,
Right.
you do this. It was just to enjoy my grandfather and my papu. His day was, and he loved it when he could just watch me swimming in the pool. If he could spend a couple hours on the patio watching me swimming in the pool and so forth, he was in heaven.
Yeah.
So, they didn't thrust it on until I was older, and I felt like it was age appropriate caregiving for him.
Hmm.
Bring your grandfather this, or bring your papu
Yes.
this, or what have you.
Yes.
I just got to enjoy him for many years. Um,
Oh, that's awesome.
and Christmas times, they made sure that they used to come. Now, we used to have every holiday over at my grandparents' house. They only lived like 20 minutes away.
Oh,
But
okay.
Christmas time, my grandparents felt it was very important that I had Christmas in my house. So
Mm.
this meant that my grandfather had to come over. He had
Mm.
an electric lift, but he also had a portable lift,
Mm. Okay.
so that he could have a nap in the afternoon, which he did.
Hmm.
So they would come over for the day, and of course, it meant there wasn't the conveniences that he had in his house. He had a house built with doors that were wheelchair accessible. He had a hospital bed. He didn't have any of that, but he made the
Mm.
sacrifice to come over and enjoy it. So I had Christmas in my house at least once. They were
Yeah.
insistent on that, and
Wow.
my grandparents were. And then when we would go to Disney World, we would stay at the Polynesian every
Hmm.
year, or every other year we go to Disney, and
Okay.
that meant that they had to order a hospital bed to put in the suite.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there was a hospital bed. It meant that when we went to the park, we would go half the morning and then go back so we could have a rest, and then half the rest of
Yes.
it. But there was a hospital bed delivered to the hotel, because he couldn't use a regular bed,
Oh, for sure.
and
Yeah.
they would have to use the portable lift, which my
Right.
grandmother needed help doing because her arm wouldn't allow her to do it.
Of course not.
So,
Oh.
they made those accommodations, and I didn't connect all the dots, what they had to probably go through to make sure all that happened.
Yeah.
But he was going to go to Disney World and enjoy it because he wanted to see me enjoy it. And I did. And I have some wonderful memories of going to Disney and riding in the van. And for those that don't know what a CB radio is, uh, he had
I
one in
do.
the CB, he had one in, we
Ooh.
had one in the van, and they would talk, and I'd hear this trucker talk and so forth because he
Yeah.
wanted the CB radio. And he
Yeah.
loved, when we used to go to Disney, he loved Big Al.
Oh, okay.
They've redone Country Bears Jamboree, and I'm so sad. I think they
Oh.
have. But he loved Big Al, and he gets such a big kick out of it. And then he had this picture of Big Al in his garage. So when we drive in the garage, it was Big Al driving in to welcome us.
The man had a sense of humor.
He did, but he
Yeah,
had a zest for life, even though he was in that wheelchair. I was like,
absolutely.
don't feel sorry for me. I'm
Nope.
enjoying my life. I've been given these, I've been dealt these cards, but I'm going to put a smile on my face.
Yep,
There wasn't a
absolutely.
time where I saw him angry or upset. And it could have been that, again, I wasn't privy to that. It wasn't
Mhm.
exposed to me. I'm sure he did it with my grandmother. I'm sure he let it all loose. That's where he wanted to, but he didn't put that on me. The only time I kind of got him to see him a little irritated was my grandmother could be very critical. And she got critical of me as I got older a little bit. And I had a car
Mhm.
and I should have gone over there more. And I stopped by to see them. And my grandmother was fussing at me for not coming over as often as I should have. And my
Yeah.
grandfather just finally said, Nan, stop. She's here. Let's enjoy her. This is why she's not coming around. And you're not to say another word. If you can't say something positive, then you need to stop. She stopped. But that
You
was the
can't
only
say something
time in
nice,
my
don't say
life that I
nothing at
ever
all, just
saw
ask
him.
comfort. Yep.
I don't think he knew how to raise his voice. It was the only time I ever saw him
Wow.
go, I ain't messaging
Yeah.
with you, Papu.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom, I've told her the same thing, Gutsta. I always told my mom I wouldn't be able to live without her. I feel like she and I shared the same heart and soul, and she still feels that. Today was a tough day. So let's throw some ones in the chat for Dufster Rhymes. Today, the lifeboat lives today were much needed. Thank you all. Um, yeah, that's every now and then we just need to come around each other, don't we?
Yeah.
That whole connection, the ripples, the loves and hugs and all of this, that simply having people, even though we've never met Mary, we've
Yeah.
never
One of these
met.
days.
Well, no, but the thing is, when
Yes.
we look at, people would fall in love in letters. They would
Yeah,
never even see each other's faces, right?
exactly.
And here we now have this type of technology that we can see each other, we can be with each other, we can have coffee together. Just happens to be we're entire continent apart. You
Exactly.
know, oh
Well,
well.
and that's why the ripples are starting. They may not always be able to facilitate it streaming on the
Hmm.
lifeboat. Hopefully that's the end goal. But that's
Yeah.
why I put my channel in the chat. Kim's channel is doing lives.
Hmm.
I have what I call the lighthouse beacons. Just, tell me to turn the lighthouse on and I'll turn it on. It's all coming
Mm,
down to connection. It's all that these ripples are having their own channels in their own lives. So you can drop in and be a part of, having that discussion and feeling like you're not by yourself. And that's the point of it.
right. Right. Yeah. Your mom makes a good point here. He did go through a time of depression after he became a quadriplegic. At least when he was a paraplegic, he had some measure of independence. And that's something that,
And see, I didn't see that.
right. Yeah. You weren't, not only were you not privy, you probably were not,
Old
the word
enough.
that's not quite the word I was looking for, that you
No.
weren't burdened with that,
Yeah.
right? Your family tried to keep you safe from all of that worry and all
Yeah.
of that. So yeah, yeah. You were going to
I'm
say
sure
something?
there was. It was like, I know for myself, if I can get to the point where I can drive again, maybe my
Mm-hmm.
counselor can help me through that. Maybe not. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But to have to look and think I may never be able to drive again takes a
Yeah.
huge part. I mean, I just can't imagine him sitting in that parking lot going, call Kathy. I can't drive home. I mean, and realizing that that part of his life is over. And then being able to say, okay, I can't take my hand and itch my nose. I have to have somebody else itch his nose. And I'm sure there was times where he had itches that he just had to go through and go, because he didn't want to bother anybody to itch it. I mean, that was the kind of guy he was. And, you know, if he needed anything in the middle of the night, it was my grandmother that had to wake up and caregive him for in the middle of the night. He needed an itch, or he had an itch, he needed a drink of water, whatever it was. There were times where he was in the hospital and I did go. And, you know, because my grandmother and my mom would stay with him. And even though he had the hospital, he couldn't press the hospital button to call the nurse.
Right.
So he would go ahead and somebody would stay with him. And so if my grandmother was there during the day crew, my mother would go the night crew. And I would offer, I was old enough at that point to come stay with him. And he always just like, oh, thank you so much. I'm really sorry to bother you. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And she said it was probably 5 when it happened. So it's probably why I don't remember it.
Probably.
But
at
if
5,
he wanted,
we have such a narrow view, don't we?
If he was in the hospital, that meant that there had to be somebody else, because the simple thing of being able to press the nurse's button was something that he couldn't do. So we just think about that. A lot of us don't think. We go in the hospital, we don't need somebody sitting there. He had to have somebody there. They couldn't be calling on the nurses all the time to give him a drink of water or feed him or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, my mom, like I said, she worked in care homes my whole life. That is a whole nother job.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't have the capacity to do that. I'm a teacher. I'm not a carer. I care about people. Don't get me wrong. I care a lot, but I am not that person. My mom is 100% that person. When her husband died, when Keith died, he left a hole, and she was single for a number of years. She missed him a ton, but then it got to the point she needed somebody to care for again.
Yeah.
And so now she has her husband, Bob. They met in their 70s, so there's always hope, hope. But yeah, when you're a caregiver, what happened with your grandma once your grandpa died? How long was she alive after he died?
He died in 97 and she died in 2018.
Oh,
so
wow.
It was quite a long, and I can tell you exactly.
11 years.
Exactly. It was Christina that kept her alive.
Wow.
She was alive from the time that, after his death. I was pregnant with Christina when he passed away. I didn't know it. And then Christina was born in 98, and she had her high school graduation in 2018, and she died a month later. So she stayed around, and that little girl kept her alive because she had a reason and a purpose. And I don't know if she would have stayed around that long if she hadn't, because her whole life had been consumed, at least the past 25 some years, of taking care of my grandfather. And
absolutely,
you need to know your limitations. You got to ask for help. You got to take breaks. You got to know your limitations. My grandmother won some kind of cruise.
Oh.
It was a day cruise. And we lived in Florida, so the port wasn't too far away. It was a day cruise. And my mom and my dad were going to stay with my grandfather. But you would not believe what we went through to get that woman on the cruise. She kept saying, I can't swim. And I said, I don't care. And the two of us were a teenager. We were going to Jamaica. It's a really nice memory that I have. But she fought that one like a bear, because she didn't want to go. She didn't want to leave him for a second.
Okay.
And that was at times difficult. I think that she was just one of those who just gave and gave and gave and gave and gave. She didn't want to leave his side. She didn't want to leave anybody. I don't think she trusted anybody to take care of him like she did, let alone to get on a boat.
Because she can't swim.
Even though she trusted my mom and my dad, it wasn't her. I cannot believe what it was like to be able to get her on that boat. My mom knows what it was like. She said, I was so glad when I saw you. We went on We had to get up like at 3 o'clock in the morning. We went on like a bus down to the port. She said, I was so glad to see
Oh,
you guys on that bus and goodbye. She did not want to do that. Well, have a good night, Dusty. I'm glad that you could join us. And,
yes. At 2
there's
a.m.,
always
I would be falling off my perch as well.
there's always connection everywhere.
Absolutely.
But, I think of him, and there's usually the 31st is really hard for me because the 31st is when he passed away. And then in 2001 and January 1st is when my dad passed away. So I
Oh,
find
wow.
New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, it depends on the years. It can sometimes be very
Wow.
difficult because it's like one right after another.
Absolutely.
But
Big
I
losses too.
yeah, very significant.
Yeah.
But I don't
Yeah.
think I realized the significance that that man, my papu, made an impact on my life.
Mhm.
And all my grandparents are gone now. I don't have that anymore.
Oh, wow.
But I used to walk into my grandfather's house and I said, I wish he would have taught me Greek because he was fluent in Greek. When
Oh,
he was
yeah.
growing up, his grandfather or his dad would talk English to him, and he
Mhm.
would have his kids talk Greek to the father. So they would keep up the Greek, and he would
Oh,
keep up, he would learn English.
learn the English.
So when I used to
Oh,
walk into my
good
grandfather's
idea.
house as I got older, I used to say, Yasu papu tikanes. Well, tikanes is how are you? And Yasu is used, or opa, in celebration. And papu is grandfather.
Mhm.
So I learned a little bit of Greek, little bit. If I
Yeah.
talk over people, it's part of my Greek heritage, y'all.
And I talk over people because I have ADHD. I'm really sorry. Yes, we did that once. We're just one time today so far. So I'm grateful it's only been one. But Anne was her mom's caregiver for over 6 years. She had COPD. I can't remember. Cardio obstructive pulmonary disorder. Does that sound right? And macro degeneration, so an eye disease. So she was nearly blind. She doesn't regret one moment, and you only have one set of parents. And it is
Yes.
really tough when they die. Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And we'll talk about dementia. That's a whole, like I said, a whole nother subject because that was my dad.
Yep.
He had it for 7 years. But I look back at our caregiving for my grandfather, and I think we learned a lot from him. So by the time
Mhm.
we had to get to the stage with my dad, my mom
Mhm.
knew how to do so much because of what she had to do for my papu.
Right.
And, just the simplest things in life. But his determination to put that smile on your face
Mhm.
and I think of him with so many warm memories and just his laugh and his smile. It's like it was just
Yeah.
always there. Um, and I'm so grateful for that, even though I know he went through so much. And I know my nana did, even though she didn't show it. She
Mhm.
pulled it off like unbelievably. And his family would come down and give her breaks and so forth. And you know, you know,
Mhm.
they would help. I know my dad at one point was offered to go serve. He was a Naval Reserve training duty.
Oh, okay.
He served in the Navy for 28 years, 10 months, and 6
Oh,
days.
wow.
He's a first class
Awesome.
petty officer.
Not that you were counting or
Oh,
anything.
he counted. My dad counted.
Okay.
And he was offered to go actually served Papua and Yaya.
Mhm.
He was actually served to go serve. He was asked to go serve in the Pentagon in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And he didn't even approach my mom. He said, no, I can't. And the reason he didn't was because he didn't want to leave my grandparents. He knew I was the only grandchild that they had, and he knew that he did
Mhm.
not want to take my mother away from assisting with caregiving of her parents, her mom and her stepdad.
Mhm.
And so that was another thing that my dad would have loved to work in the Navy or in the Pentagon, he probably still would be alive. I think some of his dementia came from doing pest control and working with chemicals and so forth.
Yeah, I could see that.
And but I think that it was really honorable of him to not even approach that with my mom and say, yeah, I know I
Yeah,
would really love to do this, but I'm thinking more importantly of George and Nan and you having to caregive, because
absolutely.
my mom was there to help, but my uncle was an alcoholic. So he was
Mm.
not able to be a dependent force in caregiving.
Mm-hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
was the last 10 years of my grandmother's life, but for a period of time, he was not trustworthy.
Right.
He couldn't drive. So he had to stop driving because of his drinking. So that was not a help, unfortunately. So he could not be an assistance.
Yeah. No, and making sure that you weren't taken away. That
Oh,
was,
yeah, he
you
would have
were
killed.
just as much a life-giving sustenance to your grandpa as any
Yeah.
caregiver would have been, right?
I think it got him out of
So,
bed
absolutely. Yeah.
because I would spend
Like,
summers over there. When I didn't
mm,
go to school,
right.
I would go spend summers over there for the
Mm-hmm.
summer and go play in the pool. And I wasn't young enough to stay home. So I go over there when my mom had to
Mm,
go over there, and we go over there, through the summer. So
mm-hmm.
I think for sure it was, at times I got him out of bed in a way that, it was motivating. I think it got him
Absolutely.
to say that, we're going to go out to go out and eat and um, enjoy a meal together. And I think it helped his family coming down and interacting and having his nieces and nephews around and
Mm-hmm.
laughing and so forth was just, and of course my Nana had her own little part of it, I'm sure, that kept him going. But
Oh, I'm
it all
sure.
helped in the caregiving of it, of the aspect of
Absolutely.
it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, um, I'm going to stop us there tonight just because these are great memories to end on, I think.
Yes.
These are really
Yes.
great memories to end on. I am going to put my email up here because I am looking for people to have these types of conversations with.
She's a
Whether
great
you are
interviewer.
somebody who simply has a very interesting life story, or I'm looking particularly for people with certain mental illnesses that need to be demystified, that need to be humanized.
Yep.
Schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder. We don't all have obsessive compulsive disorder. It's not that. I can guarantee it. So I'd like to be able to talk about what it really is. You know, dissociative identity disorder, very, very rare, but I do have a friend who has it. So, I mean, being able to talk about these types of things, I would love to be able to talk with you, see how we can bring humanity and light to things that go on in your life. So please email me. Let me
Exactly.
know what you have that you would like to chat about,
Yep.
and we can definitely make a time to get together and talk. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Mary.
You're welcome. If you're a caregiver, please don't suffer in silence.
Please
Talk,
don't.
talk to somebody, have a
Yep,
counselor, have somebody that you can lean on so that you can
yep,
talk about it, so that you're not trying to lift it up. Know your limitations, know what you can do and what you
absolutely.
can't.
Yep.
And it's just very important that we just have sources like the lifeboat and like your channel and like my channel and the other ripples that are
Mhm.
happening, so that we're not
Absolutely.
alone,
That's
so that we
right.
can get through it.
Exactly. Well said. Well said. All righty, everybody. Have a great night, and I will see you Tuesday next week on my channel.
I love you,
Bye.
Papu.